We last spoke at the New Economy Forum in Singapore, and we were talking about, again, this trade war implications for supply chains and trade flows across Asia. But, you know, I'm wondering, even if we get a beat when it comes to Chinese trade and a managed moderation of the Chinese slowdown, there is a chance that this trade war, this strategic battle, if you will go on for the next 10, 20 years, if you will. What does that mean in terms of opportunities and risks for Asian economies?
That's exactly right. And I'm so glad that you've pointed out that this is a long-term play and dynamic and competition, and it does not involve just the United States and China. There are multiple significant players in this trade war, and we see already how they're positioning themselves, such as Europe and ASEAN, to benefit from the trade war. You have the diversion of foreign investment out of China into ASEAN accelerating. You have Europe trying to substitute for American suppliers and goods as their costs rise because of reciprocal tariffs and so forth. So there are many players in this competition, and it will play out over not just on a quarterly basis, but really over the next a decade or more. But what we can also look backwards and see is that Asia has, since the Asian financial crisis, done a very good job of building more resilience internally in its markets, bringing down its own barriers. One of the things that's going to be happening this year is the the agreement of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. TPP has just gone into effect. So what Asians are doing is saying, how can we substitute as much as possible for the now politically risky suppliers and trade that we have with the United States because of the Trump administration's politically motivated export controls?
What's quite interesting, though, is, you know, you have these multiple economies across Asia that have really attractive demographics, economies like India, like across Southeast Asia, that could potentially make up for some of the slackening that we see in the Chinese economy. But isn't it still the case, so supply chains being what they are, supply demand being what it is, that when China sneezes, the rest of Asia and the rest of the world catches a cold?
Well, yes and no. I mean, if you go back to really, again, even before the financial crisis, which was a decade ago, Asia's integration had made the region sufficiently sort of self-sufficient, autarkic almost, in the sense of the provision of trade and goods with each other. You can even go back to the super cycle period of the 1990s, when the West Asian oil exporters began to be the largest suppliers of energy to East Asia. Now, China's slowdown isn't necessarily bad for the rest of Asia. If you look, for example, at how Western companies and multinationals are starting to realize that they have had too many eggs in the China basket. They need to start diverting their investment, but also focusing their exports more on this swath of countries from India through Southeast Asia. That's 2.5 billion people. You mentioned the younger demographics and the fast, the rapid urbanization, the digitization that's happening in these economies. They represent enormous potential. By the calculations that I present in the book, these 2.5 billion people, if they grow at only half the rate that China has. Remember that India is already growing faster than China, but let's just say that this region grows at only 5%. It will equal China's current GDP in less than a decade. So these are markets that actually we have overlooked for far too long.